Well, it was a slow week in the pro wrestling world. I'm obviously kidding. It was actually quite busy with everything going on with this WWE sale impending, and I put that in air quotes, plus a very eventful AEW Dynamite. We're going to talk about it all next on the Squared Circle Psychobabble, the subjectively objective podcast for fans of the sports entertainment known as pro wrestling. My name is Michael Valenti. Joining me is Ralph Valenti. Ralph, before we start this week's episode, I have to give an apology to our Babble section. I have to give a sincere apology because a couple weeks ago, I made a very bold prediction and thought this was definitely going to happen, that Wednesday night's Dynamite would be the most talked about AEW show since All Out 2021 because of all the things that were going to happen on it. We were going to get the return of CM Punk. We were going to get the return of FTR. We were going to get the debut of Sasha Banks, a.k.a. Mercedes Mone, and none of that happened. So I apologize to those who I got their hopes up, and it is my fault that anyone that has backlash towards AEW this past Wednesday for the no-show of Mercedes Mone, it is my fault because I put it in your head. It wasn't Tony Khan. It wasn't Britt Baker. It wasn't Saraya. It was me. So again, I apologize for that. So Ralph, do you accept my apology? Do you speak on behalf of the Babble section and accept my apology that it was my fault that people are outraged of no Mercedes Mone on AEW Dynamite this week?
Well, I don't think you're necessarily the one that has to apologize, but I do think a certain, prominent figure within AEW, I think you could say he somewhat misled his viewers and somewhat misled the fans to believe that something may happen. Would you agree with that statement? What do you think of this whole Mercedes Mone situation?
Look, last week they said that Tony Storm was going to be the partner. I mean, a lot of people went into this week thinking that it was a red herring, myself included, where the stuff with Sheeta kind of going and reacting the way she did when Tony Storm was picked, that she would be attacked backstage and then lead to Mercedes Mone's debut. Everyone kind of had that same outlook on what was going to happen and probably thought that what was going to happen, but obviously that was not the case. Although they did progress the storyline nonetheless because Sheeta got involved in the finish by throwing the kendo stick in between, I believe it was Britt Baker and Tony Storm. Then kendo was used by Britt Baker. Jamie Hayter gets a pin and the victory there. So they progressed that storyline of Tony Storm and Sheeta, but no Mone. But is it Tony Khan's fault? Is it Tony Khan's fault that Mone wasn't there and that people were, quote, led to believe that she was going to be there?
First of all, why tease a mystery partner just for the sake of teasing a mystery partner? Tony Storm was off TV for how long? Maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month. I don't even know if it was that long. Okay, so number one, before she left, she wasn't crazy over. She wasn't in some position where it was like, okay, if you go away, we're really going to miss you. When you come back, it's going to be a big deal. Especially knowing that Mercedes was, everybody suggested, and actually what ended up happening was going to debut in, New Japan Pro Wrestling. And then there were other people even suggesting, and I'm talking about wrestling journalists who were saying she's going to go to AEW. That, to this point, has not happened. Now, could there be other reasons why?
Before you continue, what news journalists were saying that Sasha Banks, Mercedes Mone, was definitely going to AEW?
Do you want me to pull them up
because it wasn't Meltzer. It wasn't Meltzer.
No, it wasn't Meltzer. He was one of the few that said no.
Right, but I'm saying, depending on what journalists you're talking about, and we're kind of going to dive into this with the WWE sale thing too, people really need to, figure out which ones are credible news sources and which ones aren't.
That. I'm not debating that. And there's many things I'm going to actually talk about with this whole thing, not just on this topic, but later when we get to the whole WWE thing. For this specific situation, you can fault, the fans for trusting non-credible wrestling journalists because, as you pointed out, most, if not all, of the credible ones, for the ones at least that I pay attention to, and maybe the ones you pay attention to, did not say she was going to go to AEW. In fact, Meltzer did say she's not going. She will not be there. When you have a situation where there is somebody who is a major free agent. And there is speculation about something like this, especially considering you're teasing a mystery opponent or partner or anything of that nature, and you don't think you can deliver a surprise that's going to get the fans talking. And Tony has done that many times where he's actually teased a surprise and it's got the fans talking because they were, excited and the payoff was there. That has happened many times. It happened with Bryan Danielson and it happened with Adam Cole on the same night.
CM Punk.
CM Punk. This was not a case of that. Okay. They teased a mystery partner, somebody who didn't have a whole lot of steam going into the show, who, when she went up against the heel and Jamie Hayter, they cheered for Jamie Hayter. They didn't cheer for her, who was the face. So that was number one. The thing that really bothered me, even knowing as speculation continued to grow and fans, even if it was to their own fault, got excited for, Mercedes potentially debuting, they did the line about the boss and the wink. And that was more than enough for me to say, that's ill-advised. Tony Khan should not have signed off on that. If he did sign off on it, they should have edited it out. They should have redid it. Because to me, that was, look, okay, if you're going to go that far to mislead your audience or to make a suggestion and not deliver on it, to me, quite honestly, after that match, straight through the entrance of that match, knowing she wasn't going to show up, that was one of probably the most deflating aspects of last night's show, which was very good up until that point. Do you agree with that point? Do you think the fans
absolutely.
were out of it? And did that transpire until the main event? I would say the main event got people back into it, but everything from the entrances to the main event didn't have the same energy that we had seen.
Right. And from what we've seen on social media too, there were videos of the audience where they thought the lights were going out for the Monet debut, but it was really just them going to shut the lights so that they could do the Rampage advertising, and the fans were not happy about that. And listen, it's not the first time that a wrestling promotion has made people believe something was going to happen and then it doesn't happen. How many times is Kenny Omega or CM Punk going to be entering number 30 in the Royal Rumble?
Yep.
And that's not necessarily WWE laying hints like AEW did with the boss line. And that could have just been Britt Baker and Tony Khan just going with it because he wanted to stir things up and get people talking, even if it meant that he was going to get some heat for it. But at the same time, maybe Britt still says the line and maybe Mercedes Mone still comes to AEW. It might not be, this week's episode of Dynamite, but it could be, say, Revolution, because you have the San Jose show in New Japan Pro Wrestling, which sold out and moved a lot of those tickets after Mercedes Mone debuted in New Japan. So if you're worried about her being a draw, there's a small sample set that, hey, maybe she is a draw outside of WWE. But nonetheless, she could still show up in AEW. Do you think that last night was the foregone conclusion that if she wasn't debuting on this episode of Dynamite, she's not debuting at all in AEW?
I think at any point she could show up in AEW, but the fact that they kind of misled people, that in my opinion, it's not the best thing to do.
All right. But I definitely think eventually she will still go to AEW. I don't think a return to WWE is happening. Maybe this is just her being full-time with Stardom and full-time in New Japan Pro Wrestling. That is definitely a possibility too. But we'll see as the months progress. But as you kind of mentioned, up until this point of AEW Dynamite, it was a very, very good episode and a lot to talk about here. And the first thing I want to talk about is the newsworthy thing that really did happen outside of the no debut of Mercedes Mone, and that is the return of Adam Cole. No, it's not the CM Punk return that I thought was going to happen on this episode, but still a pretty big return nonetheless. The crowd absolutely popped for this return, a very unexpected return. There wasn't really news swirling of him coming back. There wasn't any rumors coming around that were saying that he was in the building or anything of that matter. He just showed up and the crowd went nuts for it. And deservedly so. I mean, he is one of the best wrestlers in the world today, whether he was in WWE or AEW, that hasn't changed. So the question is, after his very heartfelt promo and the crowd really behind him, what is next for Adam Cole, baby?
It's tough to tell because when you kind of look at how things are laid out right now, especially going into a pay-per-view, Daniel Bryan's off. You know, he's going to be with going against MJF, you would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
The Elite, they just won the titles last night, so
the trios titles. Yeah,
I mean, technically, I guess he can go up against one of them or however many of them. Who knows? I don't know. I mean, there's guys that are, you know, they're, I don't know if underutilized. It's just like you forget they're almost there. I mean, you know, you could even do something with like an Eddie Kingston, I guess. Yeah, when's the last time we've seen him on Dynamite? I know he's going to be on Rampage, this week?
Yep. I mean, you could also, it depends, because after the reaction from this week, it was a very babyface reaction, obviously. They really wanted him back, but the last time we saw him, he was part of that attack against the Elite. Obviously, Bobby Fish is gone, so you're not going to see that storyline progress, at least with Bobby Fish in the picture. Kyle O'Reilly we haven't seen and might not see for a while either because he has his own injuries he's recovering from. So do you go and revisit the Battle of the Atoms, Adam Hangman Page and Adam Cole for Revolution? Do you go and give a high-profile match to Konosuke Takeshita after what happened this week on Dynamite as well, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit? Do you go and just wait for Kyle O'Reilly to come back and go into the tag team division and go after the Acclaimed? There's a lot I think Adam Cole can do, and I'm excited to see what happens in the weeks to come. If I were Tony Khan, I would keep him in the singles division, and if Darby Allin is continuing these open challenges, do Darby Allin versus Adam Cole at Revolution as an open challenge for the TNT Championship. Yeah. Win or lose, like, that's going to be a hell of a match. Even if Darby loses, you know he's defending the title frequently between now and Revolution, so it will still be a decent title reign for, say, 2 months. Adam Cole takes it over and adds more prestige to the TNT Championship, which has been missing for a while. I would be fine with that.
Yeah, I would be too. I mean, that could actually be a really good. It would certainly be a fun match, and high-profile match. And you know, with Darby, you know, I think right now him winning the title, doing the open challenge, I think that's a good way to really kind of cement him as a guy that's going to be there. You know, for somebody that was kind of put on the back burner for a while. So that would not be a bad idea at all.
Right, and the other thing you could do too, if they do the Face of the Revolution ladder match this year again, obviously you could put Adam Cole in that Face of the Revolution ladder match where he could win and then eventually take on Darby Allin for the TNT Championship that way. But, you know, I brought up Adam Hangman Page. He opened up AEW Dynamite this week in a very, very good match with Jon Moxley. And he actually ends up beating Jon Moxley clean, pinning him. And if my research is correct and the people on Twitter that posted this stat originally are correct, this is only the second time in the near 4 years existence of AEW that Jon Moxley has been pinned cleanly in an AEW ring. The other time being CM Punk at All Out. So this is a big win for Hangman Page. Obviously, the story there with Moxley I thought was very good heading into this match. I thought it would lead to a pay-per-view match, but obviously not the case. We see Moxley being checked on for a concussion afterwards. Looked like he got knocked out by the buckshot lariat of Hangman Page. So kayfabe or not kayfabe, we'll see how that progresses in the weeks to go. But what's next for Hangman Page here? Is it the same discussion as Adam Cole where maybe we see him in the Face of the Revolution ladder match? Could we see him against Darby for the TNT Championship? Is he going to start a big push and maybe it's him versus MJF at Double or Nothing in May? Yeah. All possibilities here.
And this is where it gets difficult, especially around a time where, you know, you're kind of limited because the pay-per-view isn't that far away. Darby isn't necessarily tied up with anybody, but he doesn't have to be if he's going to be doing the open challenge. Yeah, so this is where it gets tough. I mean, especially knowing somebody like Punk that isn't there, because especially coming off a win like that, you would think, okay, if Punk is there, they may not like each other, but there's probably some money to be made off a match like that.
if Punk's coming back, they don't want to do Punk and FTR right now, and they really can't do that for reasons that we're going to discuss later on. Have Punk versus Hangman Page after Revolution, start that, and maybe that leads to a number one contenders match that goes after MJF. They obviously have history, both MJF and Hangman Page, and MJF with CM Punk too. So it's another possibility, another road to go down. So we'll see how that goes as well. But I think another highlight of AEW Dynamite this week was what happened midway through the show. And that was a match that is going to lead to Bryan Danielson getting the number one contendership against MJF at Revolution in this match with Konosuke Takeshita. All right, so we'll talk about what happened before the match first. Obviously, what happened before, Takeshita gets introduced, then MJF comes out. He cuts a promo that is basically like a Comedy Central roast of. He roasts Ken Jeong about The Hangover and how that hasn't been success. That was in theaters almost 20 years ago. He roasts Freddie Prinze Jr., who was in the building, talks about his first memory being Scooby-Doo, hasn't done anything since. And, both of them played it off very, very well. Obviously, both big wrestling fans. And then he goes into Takeshita, where he goes after him and says, we live in America. We speak American. Takeshita replies by saying, kiss my ass, and chases him out of the ring. And Danielson comes out, chases MJF up the ramp. And the run that MJF had was quite hilarious, in my opinion. He looked like it was like a cartoon with the arms pumping and everything, running straight up there. But a lot of people did not like the line that MJF had with Takeshita saying, we live in America. We speak American here. But I think this is one of those rare cases where I understand if someone gets offended by it. And that's kind of the point of this line. But at the same time, the reaction that comes back with Takeshita responding in English, and quite well, might I add, to get the crowd super over on there, I think really helped this point in getting Takeshita super over. So while I don't condone xenophobia and racism, the line was warranted in this case, I think, to help get Takeshita over. Do you agree with that? Or do you think they should have gone a different route? Or do you think it was in poor taste?
Look, this isn't two guys arguing at the bar over, who spilled each other's drink and one guy says a racist comment to the other guy. This is predetermined, heavily scripted pro wrestling where the outcome is already known. I don't imagine MJF would have gone out of his way to say something like that without it being signed off on by somebody else, including Takeshita. I can't pronounce his name nearly as good as you can, but that's the best I'm going to do.
That's pretty close.
So yeah, and this is classic pro wrestling. This has gone on for years. And I think we live in a society now that is, obviously a little more temperamental to these type of things and automatically going to get outraged by it. But again, it's not like they are, arguing in a Walmart parking lot, hurling racial slurs at each other.
Right.
It's, the whole point of what he's trying to do is to piss people off and to, be the character that he's trying to portray. He's an asshole. MJF is an asshole. And that's exactly the reaction he was trying to get out of both the fans and, everybody in attendance. So,
and the other thing you could point out, if you are, really following Twitter and all these accounts or whatever, apparently Disco Inferno made a similar remark on Twitter because there was a picture of Takeshita with Don Callis at Battle of Los Angeles PWG's show this past week. And Disco Inferno basically said the same thing. We're like, can he speak English? If he's going to get over and be a main eventer, he's got to speak the language. Don Callis responding was like, he could speak better English than you can, and you can't even put two words together, something along those lines. So obviously with the line of, Disco Inferno, Eric Bischoff, Jim Cornette last week, it's possible that he was just channeling Disco Inferno into that promo. Obviously one that a lot of AEW fans don't like because of his criticisms towards AEW and kind of out of touch beliefs in the pro wrestling industry today. So that's where I think he was going with that. So I can understand if you believe it's in poor taste. I'm not going to disagree with you and say it's not, but I understand the approach that they were going with it. And I think it was executed well, where people hated MJF for it, and Takeshita's response was perfect and he got over for it. But let's get to the match itself. Konosuke Takeshita versus Bryan Danielson. I don't know which match was better this week on Dynamite. Hangman Page and Moxley was very good. Takeshita and Bryan Danielson was very, very good. Honestly, I could probably put them as early match of the year contenders. That's how I thought both those matches were. You know, a lot of people love Konosuke Takeshita. And a lot of people throw it out there like this is a main eventer in the making. They say, you know, obviously there's been reports that there's going to be a huge push in AEW. So, Ralph, I'll ask you, do you see a main eventer in Konosuke Takeshita?
I do. Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, the in-ring is absolutely there. The fans are certainly behind him. He's got a certain energy about himself where, you know, as soon as the bell rings, it's like you're automatically drawn in. It's easy for fans to get behind him. They want to see him win. They want to see him compete. So last night was, you know, a test for him, and he stood toe to toe and just delivered another great match. So yeah, I think he can get there.
I agree. I think what will prevent him from getting to the main event, if he never does, is that storyline that really gets him to that point. I think the fans are really behind him. He's got a great look. He's great in the ring that can, you know, put out main event caliber matches. It's just, can they get a storyline behind this guy? That's going to be the challenge. And, you know, this comes with, can he build himself a character? Can he get over the language barrier? And not to sound like Disco Inferno, but he does kind of have a point where there is that language barrier. And when your audience typically speaks one language, you have to at least speak the language well enough to connect with the audience. And I'm not saying he can't speak the language, because obviously we heard a little bit this week on Dynamite that he at least has some grasp of the language. And I think honestly his accent is barely there from what I heard. It didn't really sound like a foreigner trying to say English words, you know, like he felt comfortable saying it, which is a good thing. So that's going to help him in the long run. Does it mean that he might have a mouthpiece down the line, a manager? That's possible too. I think what his greatest asset, actually, as far as an in-ring wrestler, is the fact that he could sell his ass off.
Yep.
He can make anybody look good. I'll go out and say it. He is the best seller in AEW. And I don't know if there's anybody that could sell better than him. And I'll be interested to see if the Babel section can throw anybody else in that conversation. But to me, Konosuke Takeshita is the best seller in AEW. And that's why fans can get behind him. That's why he has great matches. And that's why, you know, he's working with Jon Moxley. He's working with Bryan Danielson. And just the short time he's been in AEW, you know, the sky's the limit with this kid. It's just a matter of getting the right storyline to get him to that main event level. So I definitely could see it. All right, let's segue a little bit here. I talked about, you know, the I shouldn't say missed opportunity, but what I thought was going to happen on this week's Dynamite didn't happen. I thought the closing moment was going to be CM Punk and FTR on the top of the ramp as we saw the Elite on the top of the ladder. That didn't happen. But I think we know why that didn't happen, and that is because Dax Harwood announced on his FTR podcast that he and Cash Wheeler are taking a small hiatus, gonna rest up, heal their injuries, and have a decision by the end of their contracts, which is in April, on what's next. And he even went to say this decision will probably be the decision that ends their career, because if they stay with AEW, the contract will be their final contract. If they go to WWE, that will be their final contract. If they go independent and circle the indies, that's what they're going to do until their career is over. Dax Harwood said that they're at the tail end of their career. I actually was surprised. I didn't realize that he's 38 years old. He says that in the podcast.
They spent so much time in NXT. I think people forget that.
Yeah, but still, I didn't think he was 38. I would think he was like
Yeah.
34 or 35, not 38.
I would have thought that too.
But still, and even then, like 38, and he's saying he's in the back end of his career. You got Jericho, who's 51, 52 wrestling, and doesn't seem like he doesn't look like he's on the back end of his career in some of these matches that he's in. You know, Great Muta is having his final matches. He's what, in his 60s? So crazy to say, like 38 years old and you're on the back end of your career. Kind of surprising just to see. But at the same time, a lot of bumps have been taken for Dax Harwood. So I could see why he would say 38 is the back end of his career. So nonetheless, where do we see FTR going? Do we see them going to WWE? Do we see them return to AEW? Or do we see them kind of circling the indies for the remainder of their career?
What's interesting is if we had this conversation a week ago, I might have answered this a little bit differently, because I feel like one of the things that would deter them from going back to WWE is the fact that Vince McMahon is back there. Literally the guy that was responsible for releasing so much of the talent probably that Triple H has brought back. The guy that was really running things when, Vince had the Revival. He had them on contract, and he didn't do a whole lot with them. If anything, he fumbled them. The back shaving segments, and who knows what could have been with FTRKO, and if they actually tried to do anything with that. Right now, as we record, Triple H is still in charge of creative. Is that whole dynamic going to change? I think that's all up in the air. I think what really matters in this is where do they think they're at in their career? We know they think they're at the tail end of their career. They've accomplished just about everything. I think the one thing that most people would say is they have not really had a mainstream, like top tier level run in the WWE like the Usos are having right now. And I think they're capable of that. And it's just a matter of, do they want to try and even entertain that? I think they'll probably re-sign with AEW. I think they'll probably stick with AEW. But again, that's the difficult thing. They've done so much. They've gone everywhere. They've done everything. The one thing that, if you were to ask me, what's the one thing missing off of their trophy case, or whatever you want to call it, it would be that. Just like their ability to main event, be the go-to tag team in the WWE, be the top tier tag team, and they could do it easily, especially now knowing that they've already kind of made a great name for themselves. They did that in NXT. It's just a matter of, do they actually want that?
I could totally see them going back to WWE for one last run. I could totally see them going back to AEW for one last run. And the way that Dax has been making comments on his podcast, it's like he's not on bad terms with either, despite what people want to believe. Like they've had their bad booking in WWE, but they've also had their bad booking in AEW, and they've also had their good bookings on both sides. They were multiple time champions in WWE. They were AEW champions they're tag team champions in AEW as well. So it's just a matter of, where do they see their legacy ending and being cemented? Is it better in AEW or is it better in WWE? We know most people in the internet wrestling community would probably say it's better off in AEW because they have the better tag team division. But if they go back to WWE, and let's say they're the ones that dethrone the Usos, and that is, a huge mark in the history books, and then they go on a run on their own, maybe not as long as the Usos, but say they go on for 8 to 12 months with the tag titles.
But hasn't AEW kind of gotten away from that whole, we're going to have the best true tag team, two individuals? In my opinion, they did at one point. That was their bread and butter. We are going to focus on that. You bring in the trios titles. Now you have the Elite. They've got those titles. You absolutely have the Acclaimed. Okay, you have who? Rey Fenix, Penta. You can't say SCU anymore. You can't say
Jurassic Express.
Jurassic Express.
They're done.
I can't. And that's what I'm saying. Like right now, I'm having trouble even thinking of some of the other. Swerve and Keith Lee were an experiment at best. The Guns are young, and who knows what they're going to do with them. So it's easy to say, oh, well, they have the best tag team division. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, maybe they do, and they did maybe at one point, and maybe they do still now. But it's kind of like, well, when you think about it, yeah, you got the Bucks, but it seems like the Bucks and Kenny are doing their own thing right now. Not to say they can't go back to that, but we already saw FTR in the Bucks. Is that what they want to stick around for as part of their legacy? And one more match with the Bucks, is that important to them?
If it means they're going over, because a lot of people believe that it's either FTR or the Young Bucks as the best tag team of this generation. So do you go about and say, look, we beat the best tag team and now we are definitely the best tag team in the world by beating the Young Bucks? Or are they part of Ring of Honor and start a rivalry with the Briscoes after their 3 matches this past year? Do they go that route? WWE, I mean, you have the Usos, you have the New Day, you have Alpha Academy, and there's a lot of other young tag teams up on the rise. Pretty Deadly is one. So
I'm looking at the last time they've updated these rankings, which I know they don't even do the rankings anymore, but you would think that would be your best indication to determine who the best tag teams are in AEW.
Well, FTR was number 1.
FTR, Bucks, Evil Uno in number 10, the Acclaimed, who are the tag champions now, Best Friends, even them. Like, it's like, well, what are the Best Friends right now? So, yeah, at one point it was easy, and I probably even said it myself. Yeah, I mean, by default, even whatever you want to say, they have the best tag team division, but I think AEW has gotten so many free agents, and now they're at the point where, it's just maybe they have the best tag team division, but that's not a focal point anymore. And it hasn't been in a long time. And I think it's slowly kind of drifted away where we haven't paid attention to it. And right now we're looking at and focusing on it because FTR is maybe contemplating leaving. So
right.
You could say there's nothing in WWE for them, but at the same time, it's like, well, what's left for them in AEW?
Right. And I think the other thing too is all the tag teams that were in this tag team division can also be applied to the trios division.
Yeah.
Lucha Brothers are in Death Triangle. You have Malachi and Brody King that are the House of Black. You have the Elite with the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. You have the Best Friends who are Chucky T and Trent, but they also have Orange Cassidy. You have...
And Danhausen.
And Danhausen, if you want to throw him in the mix too. That's the other thing. Now the tag team division, as you point out, is really just the Guns, the Acclaimed, and Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal right now as definitive tag teams and not part of a trio or a faction.
Hook and Jungle Boy are seem to
Jungle
be
Hook.
Jungle Hook, yeah.
Yeah, but those 4 are really like the only quote unquote tag teams. And even Jungle Hook, are they really considered a tag team? Is Lee Moriarty and Big Bill considered a tag team?
2 of those 4 aren't even... When you think of tag teams, I'm thinking like, whether you want to say like the Hart Foundation, the Rockers, those are tag teams.
Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express,
Bulldogs.
Right.
The Nasty Boys. You could go on and on. The Steiners.
Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting to see when April comes. They said they're going to have their decision, so we'll see how that goes. But one decision that we probably won't know until the midsummer, if you want to believe any reports of this whole thing, is where is WWE going to be sold to, or who it's going to be sold to, or what entity it's going to be a part of, because, man, did shit hit the fan since we last recorded, Ralph. So we recorded Thursday night, and by the time I uploaded the video for it to be released to the public, it was already outdated because we found out Vince McMahon voted his way back into the board and voted his way as executive chairman. Then the weekend happens. Monday Night Raw happens. Then Tuesday happens. Stephanie McMahon out of nowhere says, I'm done with WWE. I'm resigning. No longer the chairwoman. No longer part of the company. She's done. Then we get the vague tweets coming. Oh my God. If what I'm seeing is true. Oh my God. Oh my, you're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe this. Getting Twitter all wild up. Then we find out Cassidy Haynes of Bodyslam.net first reports that a deal is done done deal, were his exact words, with the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund for them to purchase WWE. And of course, this led a huge, huge, huge wave of fire in the internet wrestling community on Twitter. The amount of people that were like, I'm done, boycott WWE, whether it was because of Saudi's human rights or lack thereof, or they are afraid that Vince is coming back to creative and it's like, we don't want that. I'm done with this company. But then Wednesday morning comes, don't see any talk about this really on like the major financial news outlets like a Wall Street Journal or a CNBC or a Fox Business News. No one's really talking about it. At about 10 a.m. Wednesday morning, Ariel Helwani goes, despite the reports, I've been told it's not true. Then we had Brandon Thurston confirm as well, it's not true. And then it trickled down to more journalists saying it. During this whole time, Sean Ross Sapp and Dave Meltzer were also saying it has not been confirmed by us. But they did their shows and they were saying if it's true, and they're doing their reactions to it if it's true. So everybody's up in arms. So then once it came out that it wasn't true, then there was backlash on Cassidy Haynes and all these other Twitter quote unquote reporters. And I'm not putting Cassidy Haynes in this group. He just was the first to report it. But these other Twitter accounts like Zero News or Zero, what are they called? Zero News, Ringside News, Slice Wrestling, all these other joke ass, wrestling news Twitter accounts that work behind an avatar, tweet speculations, calling them reports. If they get one right, they're like, yeah, we got it right. And if they get it wrong, it's like, oh, something changed. No, you speculated and you got it wrong. You didn't report jack shit. And then they tweet vague shit to get people all wild up. So you got all these people backlashing on Haynes and Sean Ross Sapp, who never confirmed this. They're going after him saying he did stuff and backlashing him for his tweets, even though he never confirmed it. But Ralph, after all this, do you think the journalists deserve the backlash they got for talking about or reporting the news of the sale to the Saudis?
Of course they did. Of course they did, because this is part of the course almost on a daily, if not weekly basis on Twitter or social media. These, as you pointed out, these fake reports that, and for what it's worth, they typically tend to be mostly negative WWE type of reports that come out, because I think most people would agree that was that report that came out had a very negative reaction to it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course they deserve the outrage. Of course they deserve the backlash. Do your job. If you're going to be a journalist, if you're going to report on something, you better be pretty damn sure that it's an accurate report. Does it happen sometimes where you got a bad lead or you got a piece of it that's not quite right or you have to backtrack a little bit? Yeah, that's going to happen. I feel like
that's what Cassidy Haynes did. That's what Cassidy Haynes did. He said, okay, I said done deal, but it's actually agreed upon in principle. They still have to do this, and this for the deal to be done. So maybe he worded it wrong originally, and then shit hit the fan when people saw a done deal. But these other ones that just throw it out there, and you even had someone on Reddit, some Kermit user on
that's
Reddit.
Where this came from originally.
Yeah. So it's like, we're going to trust a Reddit user over the Wall Street Journal or CNBC that's not even talking about it yet. And that's the problem I have. Like, this is huge, huge, huge news. Okay. And even the most credible wrestling journalists like a Sean Ross Sapp or Dave Meltzer or even Cassidy Haynes, they might get some inside scoop on this, but they're probably not going to be the ones that break this when it in fact happens. It's probably going to be like a Wall Street Journal or a CNBC or whoever, like a major news outlet. And I'm not even coming out here and saying that what Cassidy Haynes is reporting has no truth to it whatsoever. I think there's some validity to it where there might be, I wouldn't say a definite done deal, but I'm sure there's some talks with the Saudi Public Investment Fund. I think there might even be an offer in place. Obviously, if there's smoke, there's fire. So,
especially knowing there's already a working relationship.
Right. There's a working relationship. So it's quite possible this deal can eventually go to the Saudis, but it's not going to be that fast. The other thing, too, we have to consider here, obviously the media rights is going to play a huge factor in the sale. So if it gets sold before the media rights get done or after the media rights get done, I would think the sale goes first and then the media rights. But if they sell to this Saudi Public Investment Fund, what does that mean for the media rights? Because we know from golf, they started the LIV Golf and no one picked it up, despite getting all the big name golfers signed to the golf league. So does that mean they're not going to be ones buying WWE? And I understand WWE is a 40-year brand compared to LIV, which is an upstart golfing league. But I think if Vince McMahon is really here to do the sale, if his sole purpose is here to do the sale, and he's actually going to perform his fiduciary duties and not just be a dick to try to move it to private so he could take control of everything, I don't see the Saudi Public Investment Fund getting the sale unless you know for a fact there's going to be a media buyer with this. Because who's gonna put WWE on knowing that the Saudis are giving them the financial backing now?
It's tough because as wrestling fans, I think your initial reaction is to react out of emotion. I and myself included. And once I saw Vince's back, Stephanie stepping down, I'm like, okay, I know where this is gonna go, and that can still happen. And Triple H can step down tomorrow. Vince can put himself in charge of creative. But again, at this point, assuming he is there just to facilitate the sale of the behemoth that he has helped create. And, I think what's crazy in all this, because I know we've certainly said it, this is still a business. WWE has always treated this as a business. There's what you see on TV, what happens in the ring, the creative, the wrestling, and that's what most people are critical of. But the one thing that you can't really say is that financially they've been in a very good place. They haven't been in a spot where they've struggled. Record profits, record revenues, all those types of things. It's been well documented. That a big part of that is because of Vince and his business mindset. So him coming back just to facilitate a sale, if that's all he's truly trying to do, so be it, I guess. What do you say to that? If he created this and he feels he's the best guy to facilitate that deal, then okay, let's step aside. Let's watch the guy play chess. Because the one thing I've always said is you may not like what you see on TV, and we've been critical of the creative and everything else, especially when he's been in charge of it. But he is a good businessman. He does have a good business mindset. So, I think we're going to see that kind of play out over the next who knows how long. I just hope he doesn't enter the creative realm.
Yeah, that's the fear I have. I know a lot of people have the fear of the Saudis landing this deal. I mean, it's definitely a big possibility now. Now that the news is out there that it's potential, obviously it could happen, and it's maybe the lead buyer at this point, but. You have other buyers. I still think Comcast could still make a strong play for this, especially with all the business that they've done for years. Endeavor seems to be a likely buyer from a lot of people that are in the financial world. Disney apparently could be a play. I know a lot of wrestling fans see Disney being the buyer. And in fact, we saw Dave Meltzer talking about this on Wrestling Observer Radio this past week, where he was in Los Angeles for Battle of Los Angeles and AEW Dynamite. And Nick Khan was apparently in Los Angeles too for the college football national championship game. And obviously with ESPN covering the game, you had the chairman of ESPN and the CEO of Disney also in attendance. So he met with them. So obviously it's possible that he was talking about a deal with them too, because Nick Khan is the CEO of WWE. So could we see Disney come in and swoop it from the Saudis and buy WWE here?
Yeah, anything is possible. Anything is possible. All I know is that when this goes through, if this goes through, this will be, I would imagine it's got to be the biggest media type sale, content type sale that I will probably witness in my lifetime, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, we've said this on this show. I think people underestimate just how truly big a content machine WWE is.
Yes.
I don't think people fully grasp how big it truly is. I think I even heard somebody throw out a number at like 6 billion is like
the current evaluation for
number?
WWE. The current evaluation for WWE is 6.5 billion.
Which is insane. It's absolutely insane. I mean, 40 years worth of content from and not, we're just talking about, I'm just talking about like the characters, that the library, the stuff like that, yeah, that you'd be inheriting. You know, the Hulk Hogan's, the Steve Austins, the Rocks, the Cenas, you know, and then everything else on top of that. So it's crazy to see it.
I've always been one, like, I don't see Disney buying it. I really don't see Disney buying it. But as we grow into this new streaming platform way of watching television, ESPN Plus is a big player in this. And obviously
they bought UFC.
They bought the rights for UFC. They bought the rights for the NHL. If you buy the rights for WWE, you take over Monday nights and put everything on ESPN Plus with Monday Night Football. And they have the feature where you could do the picture-in-picture. I know I personally hate it because I hate picture-in-picture. But for you, if you like picture-in-picture, you could have Monday Night Football on one picture, WWE Raw on the next, and you could just flip them through in between commercials. So I used to just throw it out there like, no way is it Disney. But as I keep thinking about it more and more, Disney's definitely a possible player. And obviously, WWE is available on Disney Plus in other countries in the world besides the United States. I think it's the Philippines, one of the Asian countries. I think it's available in. So they're already doing business with Disney. You put Raw and SmackDown on ESPN Plus and the entire library. That's huge for them. And they're already doing stuff with Hulu for the next day VOD stuff. So they've been in business with Disney in the past. So it's definitely possible. You know, I still think Comcast would be the favorite if not the Saudi deal goes through. But another likely contender coming out of the woodworks, if you want to believe this report from Barron's, which is a sister newspaper of the Wall Street Journal, they have reported that someone close to the Khan family have said that Tony and Shad Khan are a potential buyer for WWE. Now, obviously, for this to happen, they would have to get a financial partner to go in on this deal, because right now the Khan's net worth is $11.6 billion. So that would eat up more than half of their net worth to buy WWE, if not more, if you're considering putting them private or whatever the case may be. But Ralph, what is the percentage of the Khans buying WWE?
As close to zero as you can get. I don't buy this for a single second. He's doing a fine job with AEW, right? Everybody has had certain criticisms of him, including myself. Ring of Honor. When's the last time we've even heard anybody mention Ring of Honor, even on AEW television? Let's focus on that. Let's not worry too much about. I mean, you're going to go from having a successful startup to purchasing the most, one of the most prominent media company, if we want to consider media company, the largest wrestling promotion in the world. No, not happening.
Right. And I think if they do that, you're essentially going back to what happened in 2001.
Yeah.
When Vince bought WCW, they became the big boy in town, and there wasn't anybody really to come close to competing with them. So if AEW buys WWE, you would think they're going to merge the two. Does Tony Khan still use the AEW name, or does he actually use WWE because it's the well-recognized name? So then what happens after that? You just become the conglomerate monopoly that your fans hated to begin with. They wanted an alternative. They wanted competition. They didn't want you to buy out the competition. And then, as I mentioned before, the Khan's net worth is $11.6 billion. They're obviously not going to eat up more than half their net worth on WWE. So they're going to need financial backing to do this. Where are they going to get it from? And I know, yes, they have deals with football teams and European football teams and have all these other businesses. So it's possible they could get the financial backing somewhere else. I understand that. But the other side of the coin is, do you really think if you guys were saying Vince McMahon is petty enough to counter program AEW, do you really think he is going to accept a deal from the biggest competition in pro wrestling in AEW? Honestly, unless he really, really wants WWE to die like people think he is, and he's just going to inject lethal poison like that promo back in 2003, 2004, let's think for a second here, guys. Do we really think that's going to happen? I mean, never say never in the wrestling business, but the logic's not there.
No, I definitely don't see this happening. It's more of a fun fantasy booking thing than something that could legitimately happen, I think.
Yes, definitely. But, well, before we even get to who buys WWE, we might have a lawsuit in this whole thing because one of the shareholders has filed a lawsuit in the state of Delaware where WWE incorporated in, because they're like, hey, Vince McMahon used his 81% voting power to get himself back on the board and was not adhering to his fiduciary responsibilities. So we'll see how this lawsuit goes. But do you really see this lawsuit going anywhere?
There's going to be so many lawsuits coming out of this. I think that it's going to make people's heads spin, especially if it ends up selling. So, do I see it going anywhere? I guess. I don't know. See, that's the problem. I don't know enough about the structure of this board and what he may or may not have done and what he could or could not have violated. If somebody's suing him and they are probably a pretty prominent individual, they probably have a better idea of it than I do. So I guess it would go somewhere. Whether it's successful or not, I don't know.
I mean, it all comes down to the money. Does the person that is filing this class action lawsuit have enough financial backing to go against Vince McMahon?
Yeah.
So if Vince McMahon has the money to just keep throwing at it and just be like, do what he's got to do to eventually gets thrown away or settled or the lawsuits dropped or whatever, I don't see anything happening with this. I mean, I even tried to figure out what could happen with this. Oh, Vince McMahon's forced to sell. Okay. I've seen a lot of people say, because Twitter was incorporated in Delaware as well too, I guess. And that was the state that filed the lawsuits with Elon Musk. And they're like, oh, it forced Elon Musk to buy Twitter. And it's like, yeah, but Vince isn't buying WWE. He's selling it.
Yeah. So
unless they are going to force him to sell to whoever has the best fiduciary, whatever's the best fiduciary responsible buyer, maybe that's what this does. And if that's not the Saudis, then that might be why he files the lawsuit. But I honestly don't know what this leads to. I honestly don't think anything. It's going to be hard to win this lawsuit just because of the money that Vince could throw at it. Well, it was a very interesting week. Hopefully things die down a little bit. We got Raw 30 coming up in a couple weeks. We got the Royal Rumble coming up. So let's get back to just watching and enjoying the damn product again. But we'd love to hear your thoughts. Join us on social media at SCPB Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. If you want ad-free and unedited episodes, join SCPB Plus. Click the links in the description below, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Squared Circle Psychopath.